sound. Yay. So, shall we just jump right into the New Yorker?
Sounds good.
OBS, would you please? That. Move that down here and move that down here. No, that's some of it visible anyways. Okay.
Better.
Apologies. Okay, so right-wing organic farmers of Germany. Yay, OG fascist. Nice. By Sally McGrain from 2013. As the afternoon sun slanted into the farmhouse at the edge of the forest in this idyllic rural corner of northeast Germany, Helmut Enz poured 2 glasses of cloudy apple juice and started talking. The 45-year-old organic corn farmer and sometime activist is against genetically engineered crops, industrial soy farms in South America, and imported butter's carbon footprint. Petite, blue-eyed, and engaging, Ernst does not belong to the Green Party. Rather, he says he's a former member of the National Democratic Party, which for most Germans is pretty much the same as announcing you're a virulent neo-Nazi. Yes, that's exactly it. Ernst said that he left the NDP because too many people were nostalgic for National Socialism. That's literally the point of the party. Like it's literally like they show up with NDP flags because they can't show up with like the swastika flags because it's against the law. So they showed up with NDP flags. That's literally the point of the party. But that many elements of the ultra-right political platform, drastically reducing immigration, cutting off Israel, still appeal to him. I am not a Nazi, he said. That's a sure sign of. That's like the
sure sign of a Nazi.
Yeah. That's like I'm not racist, but.
I'm not racist, but I'm not a Nazi, but.
Yep. Oh yeah, he actually goes on. But ask your Native American friends what they think about natural multiculturalism.
Yeah. I enjoy that Nazis always like to use the Native American example. It's like, well, it wasn't multicultures that destroyed the Native Americans. It was white folks.
Yep. It was exactly one culture that. Also,
one culture and it's yours.
Yeah. Also, I've never heard Native Americans advocate for throwing anyone out or doing any kind of genocide. So that example doesn't even hold on that level.
Nope.
Okay. Every fifth German buys organically grown food on a regular basis. Most simply assume that pesticide-free carrots and still dry, locally grown potatoes come from ideologically still dirty, locally grown potatoes come from ideologically progressive left-leaning farms. But Brown Environmentalists, a book published a year ago by the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, the Green Party's political foundation, highlighted another phenomenon. Right-wing extremists championing environmental causes and engaging in organic farming, particularly in depopulated rural former East. What we're seeing is stable right-wing movement in East Germany. There was an election in Thüringen yesterday, 2 days ago, and they elected a quarter of them elected AfD, which is the leader of the party can legally, according to a court trial, be referred to as a fascist.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That's actual
legally identified.
Oh yeah, there's paperwork and everything.
Nice.
Yep.
Card carrying actual fascist.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yep. What we're seeing is a stable right-wing movement in East Germany, said Hubertus Buchstein, who is a political science professor at the University of Greifswald and one of the book's authors. Some of them have started organic farming. It seems to fit the right wing. Now, instead of being militant, a new strategy is to live in the country and sell organic apples. Some are vegan, very strict.
I always take issue with this every time we read one of these articles. Casually a couple of paragraphs ago, it says, most are still left-leaning, like progressive farms. However, it's like, okay, well, I feel like at some point someone needs to do their due diligence and define exactly what most means. Like, are we talking 80%? Is it 90%? Like, really healthy left-leaning movements, or is it like is it 51%? Like, what are my odds of hitting a Nazi farm here?
Yeah. Because that's actually like why these articles interest me, because I don't want to like financially support Nazis, but
Yeah.
do they do this weird thing where they don't openly say they're Nazis?
No, they say these are just biodynamic organic products.
Exactly.
Like, oh, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, it means that the masters. Wait a minute. The Aryan race are pure spirit beings with telekinetic powers. But wait, I buried this cow horn full of manure. Wait a minute. Okay.
I'm not a fascist, but I just enjoy burying stuff in my yard. Come on.
Listen, you ever fertilized your yard using nothing but peat moss?
Okay. As the Böll Foundation's book points out, environmentalism in Germany, an issue that today, while mainstream, is still strongly identified with the left, has deep right-wing roots. Like late 19th century blood and soil narratives celebrate a racist, often anti-Semitic, and socially Darwinistic picture of the German countryside. The Nazis who adopted the blood and soil idea were proponents of quasi-mystical connection between the land and ethnic identity. Today, neo-Nazis still like to point out that Hitler's environmental protection laws stayed on the books until the 1970s. Writes a journalist, Thoralf Staudt, in Brown Environmentalists. Even the Green Party had an extreme right-wing contingent. At its founding in 1980, the left prevailed and the party thrived. Counterintuitive as it may be, the extremist glossy environmental magazine Umwelt und Aktiv, Environment and Active, which slips xenophobic tracts on Islamic religious practices in a long articles about harmful pesticides, is not historically inaccurate with its slogan, "Environmental protection isn't green." I keep hearing about this magazine and I've yet to find it. I'm just gonna... I mean, it's good that it's not in wide circulation, but I keep hearing about it and I'm kind of curious. Not to buy it, just to stand in the shop and read it.
Yeah. See what they're talking about.
Yeah. In a country of organic mamas, that is so... that's not a thing I've heard either, but I'm sure it is. In a country of organic mamas that is so deeply sensitive to any signs of a re-ascendancy of the idea of the man with the mustache, as one organic farmer referred to Hitler, the story has caught on. In the years since Brown Environmentalists came out, it's been picked up by most major German papers. Idyll is green-brown, what color is organic? And the number of actual right-wing organic farmers, however, appears to be quite small. For the most part, the organic farming movement comes out of a progressive leftist movement, not a conservative one, said Alexander Gerber, the head of BÖLW. Bund Ökologischer Landwirte. Okay, yeah. The German League of Organic Food Producers. The blood and soil idea is in no way dormant. It's just a few cases. Just to be clear, though, this summer, BÖLW issued a resolution stating that organic farming stands for a respectful relationship with nature, animal, and people. And it is in no way compatible with ideologies that are contemptuous of humanity. Günther Hoffmann, a sanguine outdoorsman with stained teeth, grey hair to his shoulders, and a big Eurasian dog, is an expert on right-wing extremism. Recently, he served as a consultant to a large organic label looking to draft a similar No Neo-Nazis addendum. I mean, it's good they're doing it, but that is sad. Like, that's necessary.
Yeah, but I mean, it is.
Yeah.
That's true pretty much wherever you go. Like, no matter what you're doing, you have to, like, explicitly say, hey,
not you.
You're not welcome here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We met at noon in a cozy, rundown GDR time capsule of a tavern in the tiny town of Bugewitz, about an hour from the Polish border. These organic organizations are in the process of self-examination, of asking themselves, what are our values? Said Hoffmann, whose German is inflected with the French terms like dégoûtant, the word he applies with feeling to the NDP. In certain realms, the distinction between left and right can be murky. At a place like Demeter, the international organic label, whose certification standards are based on Rudolf Steiner's teachings.
Yeah, back to this again.
And I had no idea, like Demeter, I always thought it was just the company because it's like sort of prominently on the label. Demeter, I thought it was just the company, but it's nope.
Nope. Yep.
With its anthroposophic philosophy, an esoteric strain of Nazi thought can find a place, without calling attention to itself, he said. They had this problem, and they hadn't noticed it. Still, the Bell report notwithstanding, neo-Nazi organic farmers are a marginal phenomenon, stressed Hoffman. You have to understand, it's a very small part of a bigger picture. A recent study found that nearly 16% of people living in the former East Germany hold extreme right-wing attitudes. This heterogeneous group includes well-organized, aggressive young men, barflies, lawyers, women, volunteer firemen, and the sect-like back-to-the-land colonies of right-wing families, some of them second and third generation Nazis, whose women wear ankle-length skirts and whose affinity for Mecklenburg Western Pomerania, with its gently rolling fields and haunting beautiful lakes, has earned the region the reputation in recent years as the Tuscany for neo-Nazis. Indeed, when Hoffman moved here with his family shortly after the wall fell, he wasn't expecting to become an expert on the right-wing scene. Originally from Munich, he had simply fallen in love with the area's moody romantic landscape when the high-ranking right-wing extremists moved in down the road. The NDP, which only gets about 1.5% of the vote in the country as a whole, has done well in the East. With 5 and 6% of the vote, they now have seats in the state legislature of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and Saxony. Other softer tactics they employ is acting as helpers, assisting with unemployment bureaucracy, organizing kids' parties, and taking old people to the doctor. A strategy known as the nice Nazi from next door. Another is to champion popular environmental causes, often with xenophobic undertones. They are against nuclear death from Poland, genetically altered crops made by American companies, and giant pig farms. Hoffman's phone rang. An official announcement had been made that some of the funding from the NSU terror cell had come from this area. They would be available later that day. He would be available later that day for media comments. He hung up, rubbed his eyes, and rolled a cigarette. Buying an apple once in a while from Mr. Ernst, he said, is not the same as putting up a swastika.
Yeah, these articles.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, sometimes neo-Nazis. I understand in one vein how listening to right-wing rhetoric about pure soil and clean soil, and then seeing them do organic-looking farming, even though I'm still hesitant to call biodynamic farming like organic methods, because even though okay, there aren't a lot of synthetic like additives or pesticides, it's a distinctly fascistic occultist like practice.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I even consider that in the same vein intuitively, but like I don't know, the more we read these articles, the less comfortable I am even acknowledging that this is, as they phrase it, part of the environmentalist movement. I don't think that the right-wing organic farmers are part of that same like thing. I think there are progressive trends and then there are reactionary trends, and they're a distinctly reactionary one.
Yeah.
And I feel like any talk about the lines being blurry between left and right automatically makes me question, like, are you sure you don't just need glasses?
Yeah.
Because they're very clear. Like, one is accepting of people, the other is genocidal.
Yeah.
I feel like that's as clear as you can get. So they're consistently like on the basis that, okay, well they're both distrustful of factory farming. Like, well, no, factory farming is just bad. Like it's just objectively bad.
Yeah.
So
It's like
I don't know.
correlation and causation. It's like saying, 100% of, I don't know, murderers drink coffee at least once in their life. It's like, yeah, oh, sure.
Yeah,
Coffee
sure.
tastes
Yeah.
nice.
No, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or another one is they used to diagnose psychopathy
Mm-hmm.
by going to prisons and asking like serial killers
Uh-huh.
questions,
Yeah.
and they found that like a lot of serial killers had psychopathic tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
So they ended up creating this mental health condition
Mm-hmm.
out of those tendencies from serial killers, and then
Okay.
after the fact labeling that psychopathy.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
So they would say, if you're a serial killer, then you're a psychopath.
Uh-huh.
And that became like a mental health condition.
Yeah.
All of the traits that they listed are just antisocial traits,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're talking about anyone from like social anxiety to autism
Mm-hmm.
to like actually violent, dangerous,
Yeah.
psychotic people, all under that same umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, you have a hard time following the rules of police, therefore you're a psychopath. And it's like,
Yeah.
this reminds me a lot of that, where you just want to find some sort of a correlation,
Mm-hmm.
throw a label on it. Everybody organic farms? Well, Nazis organic farm.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who organic farms is,
Yeah.
it's rooted in Nazism. It's like, it's rooted in the oldest practices of human agriculture.
Yeah.
And then Nazism is also rooted in that
Mm-hmm.
because it's organic farming is the root of farming.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like the liberal or neoliberal ideology seems to stake a claim for itself for
Mm-hmm.
like for being the default way that everything is done.
Yeah.
Of course, you use genetically modified foods and you import your avocados from Mexico and
Mm-hmm.
you cover your crops in pesticides and give all of your workers cancer. Like, of course you do. That's the default. Anyone who
Yeah.
does anything different, they're all weirdos.
Yeah.
Like, well, no, we're different types
Mm-hmm.
of weirdos.
There's also a bit of like, extreme centrism going on where,
Yeah.
I'm me. I'm enlightened. These like lefties and the right wing, well, they're kind of suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. They lefties and righties don't even eat pesticides.
Exactly.
It's like, well, you shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that goes on in these articles.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, and we've read a couple of decent ones.
Yeah.
The one we did on Thursday was all right
Mm-hmm.
at pointing out, like, okay, well, these are two different groups, and
Yeah.
here's some of the reasons some of them do some things. But, like, yeah, they're not great.
No. Wait, no. That's not the thing I wanted to click on. Was that the political article?
Yeah, I think so. Which surprises me, because usually I hate Politico.
Yeah.
But it was decent.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's like, yeah, there is the blood and soil idea
Mm-hmm.
is what gives the neo-Nazi or the Nazi the impulse toward organic farming.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I always encourage people to try and analyze rhetoric to get to the principles behind that rhetoric.
Yeah.
So where with Nazi rhetoric, you get so much discussion about maintaining the land and serving like the race of the people who inhabit your land.
Yeah.
You get environmentalists, like progressive rhetoric that's like, hey, so global warming is bad and factory farms contribute to that.
Yeah.
And they're two very different critiques if you're actually listening to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out why they say the things that they say. Yeah, these articles usually just don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get frustrated reading liberal
Yeah.
articles all the time. It's like, okay, I get it. You guys are so distrustful of the right that you're gonna eat pesticides and give all of your money to Monsanto, who owns the seeds that you plant. That's your call, I guess. But I'm not a fan of that sort of lifestyle. I enjoy the idea of like, so right now, I don't know how international the law is, but in America, it's possible for you to get sued. Like if you were a farmer and you grew corn and you took seeds from your own crops and replanted, you could get sued.
Oh yeah, for copyright infringement. Yeah, that's the same in Europe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
that is insane. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we need like a healthy, organic, like localized gardening movement to sort of dial that back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like it's now we're going to start having to ask really difficult questions. Like if you buy 2 dogs and you breed your dogs, does the breeder you bought your dogs from own your dog now? Like your new puppies? Like I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah.
In any other context, and it seems like it is just distinctly ethically untenable.
Yeah.
For that position to be maintained. That's capitalism.
Yeah. We could look into like the moral questions around like overall like holding a copyright on living things.
Yeah. That's also a good point.
Yeah.
But then you would have to then take ethical considerations once you're going down that trend.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well then is it ethical to own living things?
Yeah.
If you can't own the copyright to living things, you shouldn't own living things.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to talk about the ethical considerations for like agriculture in general. Not that like I think like if corporations can't have copyrights over seeds, then there can be no agriculture.
Yeah.
More that it becomes more difficult to draw the line between when something is ethical and unethical when you start getting into the weeds, as it were. Because how do you draw the line?
Yeah.
I guess at copyright. But how do you draw the line between the seed as intellectual property and the plant as physical property legally?
Also, as the cow as a thing that they created, and the calf that then has the same.
Yeah. So like I don't know, because like I said, you wouldn't you wouldn't have a goat farm and sell 2 goats and then think that the people who buy your 2 goats owe you the baby goat when they have a kid. So like that's fairly simple.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of factory farming.
Yeah.
Which I think is where my hang-up keeps coming in. Is because like in my consideration, I'm a big fan of the slow farming techniques and that sort of philosophy.
Yeah.
Which is you try and grow things as naturally as possible and try and make your environment one that you're closer to a hunter-gatherer than a farmer. So like I'm a big fan of letting seeds fall where they fall and disperse how they would have dispersed in nature, and letting deer eat seeds and poop them out later, and trees grow where that was. If it were up to me, that's the way as much food production as is possible would be done. There are logistical questions that we could like theory craft for hours, but that's the way I think it should be done. So like I feel like at the point where we start talking about whether or not you can have a copyright on seeds. We should start talking about how do we grow food and can we just like change this whole process. Because I think that's the level we're getting at. Like when if you take Monsanto out of the question, at least in America, all of your agriculture is just like our whole infrastructure just collapses immediately. It's like, okay, and we have to rebuild that with something. Maybe let's do it in an entirely new and more ethical way.
I think without Monsanto and Bayer, with all the pesticides, like without those two companies, that's a whole different picture, and one that's really probably requires like round-up rethinking.
Yeah, exactly. It's really a revolutionary proposition in and of itself, just to replace those two companies.
Yeah.
Similar with like energy production, there are a couple of like big energy companies in America. Like DTE is a big one, and like without that company, then we really, with the amount of work we would have to do to replace their infrastructure, we might as well start talking about, can we provide every household with just solar power? And it's a ground-up, revolutionary rethinking of how we do energy provision, which, we need to do that.
Yeah.
But I just don't think we're at a state yet where we can do that as a society. Which is depressing.
Yeah. Speaking of an energy provider, the PG&E fires in California, do you know what's going on there?
More fires in California? Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. How does
it's like a constant thing.
But how does an energy company like cause fires?
I think that's more of a California thing than an energy company thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the fires just sort of start in California.
Oh,
and
okay.
then they grow to 700,000 square miles in a week, and there's just nothing that you can do because of the arid environment there.
Oh, so the fire is incidental. I keep hearing about PG&E and the fires at the same time, and I was thinking, how does what?
I mean, and they might have caused the fire, but a fire that size could be caused by a single camp or like a single person throwing away a cigarette.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not hard to make the entire state of California just yeah.
Oh yeah, after shutting off power to more than 2 million Californians earlier this month, the state's largest utility defended its controversial decision, saying the move prevented its equipment from sparking catastrophic wildfires. Jesus.
Yeah, so you end up with so like if you imagine a power plant, right? And you have all the cables everywhere that are delivering like constant massive electric currents. Those usually will give off sparks from time to time.
Oh, Jesus.
And so if they're at a dry period in a season, any one of those sparks could cause the entire like state basically to light on fire. Wildfires in California are like a huge problem, and they're getting worse as the environment gets worse. It's a correlation that they don't talk about very often. I mean, obviously in our circles you'll hear about it from time to time, but because of the slight increase in ambient temperature, the air, like the humidity in California, where every bit of humidity counts, is just that little bit lower.
Okay.
I'm guessing because things like dew dry up that much faster. Your dew point becomes that much higher or that much lower. So yeah, you're like you're building your civilization on kindling now that wasn't on kindling before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's rough
Yeah.
in California regarding fires. These I think are mostly genuine like wildfires, unlike
Mm-hmm.
Brazil where it's like
Yeah.
a mass
Yeah.
arson and deforestation program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't know for sure that the fire was started by the power company. Um, yeah, I don't know that. I know it's visible from space.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, they're suggesting that it was a electrical cable that came into contact with
Mm-hmm.
some sort of dried tree, and the electrical cable started a fire on the tree. Maybe in a storm?
But insulation is a thing.
It is a thing, yeah. I mean, these things have to be
No.
maintained to such
That is true.
ridiculous degrees. I don't know. I don't know.
I know I keep harping on about this, but I just really don't like the idea that just like fires can just start. Zip.
Yeah, and it's yeah. So
Ooh.
let me send a image
Mm-hmm.
in the Skype chat
Mm-hmm.
that you can look at, so you can see sort of the piece of equipment that they're saying might have brushed up against a tree branch to start the
Oh,
fire,
okay.
right? So like
Mm-hmm.
you would imagine up there, if you get
Yeah.
dry tree branches wrapped up in those lines,
Mm-hmm.
it can start a fire.
Yeah.
And that is like it's hard to come to grips with the fact that a fire can just start,
Mm-hmm.
but also a fire can just start.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
and so at a point we have to ask ourselves, like, are we willing to sacrifice all of the electrical infrastructure in the country
Mm-hmm.
again? And California especially could just move to 100% solar.
Mm-hmm.
They live in an environment where that's beyond just viable. It's probably more efficient than what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like it's an investment cost that I don't know who adopts.
Mm-hmm.
Short of like a Green New Deal passing, like there's
Yeah.
no way an energy company is going to suggest installing like
Nope.
more localized solar power
Mm-hmm.
facilities
Yeah.
when it already has these lines run around.
Mm-hmm.
And as expensive as this fire is, I'm sure it's slightly less expensive than revamping the nation's energy infrastructure.
Yeah.
Not by that much, though. I'm
Yeah.
going to be honest with you.
Well, it is a lot like it's rebuilding the infrastructure after a fire to make more money of it is probably a lot more economically viable than just giving people solar power so they never need to like pay an electric bill again.
Yeah, I don't think I'm like I wouldn't personally. I'm in favor of giving people all solar power just for free.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not what I would suggest
Oh, okay.
to try and get a company to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say more like, okay, you own 2 big power plants for
Mm-hmm.
California, and then you wire all of that electricity everywhere. What if you owned 200
Mm-hmm.
all over California, and then you didn't have to run as many cables?
Mm-hmm.
Then they still get the money for the contract for building that infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
and maintaining that infrastructure, but it's also a safer form of infrastructure that's a little bit more sustainable for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the sort of program that might be slightly more likely to
Yeah.
get accepted. But again, like that, at a certain point, they're going to look at you and go, okay, well, how much does it cost for me to build the 200 solar facilities?
Mm-hmm.
And like you have to be able to give them an answer. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's going to cost, you know, I wonder how much it would cost. Actually, I'm going to Google that.
Oh.
Cost for national solar. How much would it cost? I'm not going to be able to find it. How much would it cost solar power I read an article that was to power the world with solar panels. We could power the whole world with solar panel by covering 1% of the Sahara Desert. So this is ridiculous. Holy cow. The number of ads. I turned off my ad blocker for the first time in like several months, and it's just
that's
like,
a shock
what
to
is
the
going
system.
on? Holy cow. Yes. They aren't giving me a clean number. They're Why wouldn't you just give me the number? This is a frustrating question to try and answer.
Yeah. Like I'm getting all these websites about like, hey, put some solar panels on your roof, but nothing about like an actual national grid.
Yeah, and so I've gotten some answers that claim to be about an entire national grid, but then they use the price that it would cost to do it per house. And that's not efficient. You end up with a lot of redundant like infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you do it per house. So like they then multiply it by like 25,000, because like a good solar system for like a full house would be like $25,000 to install.
Yeah.
And so then they just sort of multiply that by how many households there are. And it's like, well, that's not how it would be done. And then you look at like, okay, well, what website did this come from? And it's like AmericanGreatness.com.
It's like here's an answer on Quora.com from a guy who's using a lot of numbers. I'm gonna Brian Donovan, founder of McVan ultralight hybrid aircraft engines at McVan Aerospace, is trying to answer the question: how much would it cost to convert the US entirely to solar energy? And solar, wind, and organic waste hydro EV and just any uh, and just one day of grid pumped hydro and batteries will easily supply the U.S. energy needs and of the world as well. Okay, so okay, he's got a lot of numbers, but not a lot of sentence structure.
Yeah, I think I read that one too.
Ah,
And he
okay.
doesn't ever give you like a dollar
Oh, okay.
figure.
Oh. Oh, for God's sake.
So I could tell you what percentage of the land mass it would take
Okay.
for the United States. It would take 0.6% or 0.06%
Wow.
of the land mass, which isn't that much.
No. There's a lot of, hey, put solar panels on your roof kind of websites, and a lot of should you invest into solar power?
Yeah.
But so far, I'm not seeing anyone like proposing this as an actual like political policy.
Mm-hmm. No, no one is.
Tax credit helps spur record solar panel sales.
Yeah, no, and it's not even beginning to be discussed as like a real genuine like program.
Yeah.
Most of the progressive programs going on in America right now are centered around nuclear energy.
Okay.
Because it is cleaner and more efficient than like coal.
Yeah.
And safer than coal, which is wild when you
Yeah.
consider how bad nuclear meltdowns are. But it's safer than coal.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not discussing moving to solar or hydroelectric or geothermal or even like wind energy. And like if you solar power alone could easily provide all of the power that we need in the world, right? Because it requires so much less land mass than people appreciate and can be integrated in vertical systems with like households. Like your house has enough roof space on it to provide enough power for itself. So you could put panels on houses or on like office buildings or skyscrapers or football stadiums and so on and so forth and provide enough energy pretty easily. But no one wants to scale that up to what it would cost nationally because, quite frankly, I don't think anyone believes that they can do it. Just because of the power of like oil and natural gas lobbies.
Yeah. And probably the calculation is crazy complicated because like different pricing in different states and cost of labor in different states and all that.
Yeah, I don't think that that's really that big of a factor though. Because if you're talking about organizing something like that, then you're talking about using state authority, in which case prices are irrelevant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when you're making actions that are backed by a state, like you're no longer talking about like how much money does the state have in the bank. You're talking about at what point does the company think that the state would just collapse. So like the line of credit that a state has is solely dependent on how stable that state's economy seems, not really how many assets it has.
Yeah.
So
apologies.
the United States.
Do you mean state as in like nation country or state as in like, Alabama, Tennessee?
No, like nation state.
Oh, okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool, cool.
like
Yeah,
nation
yeah,
state.
okay.
So an energy company isn't going to reject any contract that the United States government presents to it, regardless of what the cost per state might have been. The government would say something like, okay, we're doing this national grid. Here is the contract to build the national grid.
Yeah.
It is for, and then insert, ludicrous
amounts of money.
amount of money. It doesn't actually matter. And then all of the costs per state are just going to be prorated to that. That's sort of how the New Deal worked. Like you weren't talking about what are wages like in Colorado compared to California.
Okay.
When FDR said we're building the highway system, the highway system was then built.
Okay. So they just said, like, we want a highway for X amount of money, who can do it?
More or less.
Okay.
It's a blank check. States have blank checks.
Yeah.
So, sure, maybe Colorado could say, okay, well, it's going to cost you 15% more in our state than it does in every other state. The U.S. government can just print that extra money and send it.
That is true, yeah.
And so, yeah, the cost becomes abstract. Again, up until the point that, like, they try and print the money and the company looks at the check and goes, actually, I don't think your country is strong enough to back this up. And that's just not going to happen anytime soon. No.
Definitely not for the US.
Yeah, I feel like we're pretty safe in that regard. Yeah, so the number that I found that seems most logical is $10 trillion.
That sounds like a nice round number.
Yeah, it's a very convenient number, and I'm pretty sure it's one of those lazy calculations. But like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that's accurate. I'm still not sure. Just because that article is from AmericanGreatness.com.
I'm gonna register doubt.
Yeah, I'm gonna press X to doubt on that. Look at a few of these articles. In 2017, they were saying it's, 3 trillion.
Oh, so the price is going down. Nice.
Yeah. And so they're trying to like factor in interest rates for like the loan. But like that's not a thing.
Nope.
That's not a thing.
When you have a literal money printing machine, you do not need a loan.
Yeah. Yeah, they're yeah. I feel like I'm reading this calculation and it's by anonymous.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sure. To be fair, he does have a link to a solar panel in California, or to a solar plant in California that apparently cost $1.6 billion to build. but it was built in 2008 when the technology was still fairly new and fairly expensive. No, it was built longer ago than that. No, like solar panels have been getting so much cheaper at such a rate.
Yeah.
I want to get an answer. Today's goal: figure out an answer to this question. Yeah.
Okay, while you're doing research, I'm just going to watch a video about Elon Musk's roof tile solar power things. That never happened, and it's just fun laughing at Elon Musk. Oh, you've got something?
Here's a better one.
Okay.
Okay. He is the chairman of a conservation committee, and he said, in 2019, the cost of wind and solar have fallen so much that it's possible at today's relative cost to replace 74% of U.S. coal and wind with solar while saving money.
Wow.
The total capital and operating cost of wind and solar is less than the fuel costs alone for existing coal. It also means the same for most existing natural gas and nuclear generation.
Okay.
By 2025, the fraction expected to be 86%, which means you could replace 86% of all of our energy with solar at a savings in 2025. Talking about storage. I'll give you a summary. I would put the answer to the total cost around $1.4 trillion.
Oh
wow! But
that's like 2 years of military budget.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This is sort of, that's along the lines of what I had heard. It was like the comparison was talking about like a scaling down of like U.S. foreign bases, which is like sketchy rhetoric, but I'll ignore that for now. And it said like you could reduce the U.S. foreign base budget by a certain amount and pay for solar power in 10 years with it. And like, yeah, for sure, let's do that because we only have, 16 years.
Yep.
So like maybe we should get on that. Yeah. Apparently wind and utility scale solar costs less than fossil fuel generation in every state and every nation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And apparently the industry hasn't adjusted to the like radical shifts in the cost of like solar panels. Like, because like I said, they're getting so cheap so fast. I want to say that that now they are a tenth of the price of what they were in 2009. So in 10 years, they've scaled down by an order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Which is like, yeah, markets don't adjust as fast as this price has been dropping.
Yeah.
The technology is it's advanced. So I'm a little bit, I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to install Tesla solar power.
Oh, no.
because
it's Tesla, obviously.
but yeah, I feel like that was never going to be a viable option anyway.
No.
Everything that Elon Musk has tried to do has been more expensive than it needed to be in order to have his brand associated with it.
Yeah. It's like the stupid version of good ideas. It's really weird.
Yeah. Or it's like the Apple version of good ideas.
Yeah.
It's like taking everything in the world and just like making it Apple.
Mm-hmm.
He did the same thing. Like he installed some solar panels in one of the nations after a hurricane, and then
Oh, wasn't it in
was trying to.
Puerto Rico? Or
I
did he
think it was
install
Puerto Rico. Yeah,
batteries there? Something, yeah.
yeah. He tried to install some sort of infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
and the project actually failed. But he was
Mm-hmm.
taking a lot of PR credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, they got pretty mad about it.
Yeah.
It didn't go over well with the locals there.
Like I remember they like really like all the newspapers were like talking about how what a great guy he is that he's doing this and blah 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 blah, and then like nobody talked about the fact that it did not work.
It didn't work, and the locals broke into the solar plants and
Mm-hmm.
smashed up all the panels.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll call that an epic fail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like solar power in general, because one of the things I've been researching as I'm
Mm-hmm.
like planning on the next phase of my life
Mm-hmm.
is an off-grid solar system. I want to get a ranch.
Wow.
Uh,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I want to get a ranch and live
Mm-hmm.
off-grid as much as I can
Yeah.
anyway. And so I've been looking at like the solar power that I would need.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at systems that are good for like 16 people
Yeah.
and 4 households and
Mm-hmm.
like a whole farm,
Yeah.
and they're like $20,000.
What? Holy
Yeah,
shit.
to
That's
install,
amazing.
and they're like most of the year you'll be selling energy back to the grid,
Yeah.
so you'll make a profit
Mm-hmm.
and offset bills with that
Yeah.
production. And it's like, yeah, that's like I'm very fascinated with solar power at the moment.
Yeah.
And I just so happen to know that like Elon Musk's battery system specifically
Mm-hmm.
isn't sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
The way the batteries are made, so they use. I will show you an example of the
Okay.
battery because I so happen to have one because they're actually common household, not too common,
Mm-hmm.
but fairly common
Okay.
household batteries. So they're these things right here.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same size that fit in like a vaporizer
Okay.
mod. And his cars run on sets of these.
Mm-hmm.
His solar power would be generated into versions of these. And they're just rechargeable batteries.
Yeah.
What are they called? I cannot find the name of the type of battery that it is, but they are 18650 lithium-ion batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, all of his systems work by linking a couple thousand of those in series
Mm-hmm.
and running your current through a whole bunch of these batteries
Okay.
at once. Yeah, and they'll each be cased like the one I showed you was, and
Uh-huh.
contained like the one I showed you was.
Yeah.
They're not actually large batteries.
Mm-hmm.
They're many, many little batteries in a large package.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a cell. And then there are several of those cells in every car, right? And
Okay.
so the amount of resources that it takes and the amount of like technically intensive processing that it takes
Mm-hmm.
to make each of those batteries, I mean, it's an incredible drain on
Yeah.
the rare earth materials
Mm-hmm.
that are required to make a battery. So you're talking about lithium and like cobalt
Mm-hmm.
and like all of these minerals.
Yeah.
Those have to be mined from somewhere,
Yeah.
processed somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then manufactured and assembled somewhere. And we've read so much about like just avocados cause so much damage that like this is not a way forward for anyone.
No.
But if you look at chemical deep cell batteries,
Mm-hmm.
deep cell battery, you're talking about something closer to like what a car
Mm-hmm.
runs on.
Okay.
So if you're building the big ones are the brownish looking ones.
Mm-hmm.
If you're building a solar system, you would actually use several of these
Okay.
because it's not 100,000 vape batteries
Yeah.
stacked on top of each other. These are like very large, very easily recharged batteries that they have to be serviced with water,
Okay.
which is dangerous because now you have like you open up the thing and now you're looking at battery acid and you have to like service your battery, which is slightly less safe for like the average household like homeowner to do. But like you would just have to have a regular visit from an electrician.
Yeah.
Yeah, but flooded deep cell batteries are what most households would use for solar power, and they're very durable and they last a long time. Again, provided you service them well. They're a little bit easier on the environment and the labor force, particularly in the global south, to produce. Still, again, like everything else, there is no ethical consumption. So they do still cause harm, but it's just way less harm than like an Elon Musk sort of system.
I mean, 1,000 tiny batteries just sounds like a terrible idea. It's like, we're gonna store our water in like 3,000 shot glasses.
Yeah, it's just stupid on the face of it. But that's how his car runs, and people think that Tesla batteries are magic.
Of course.
And they're not. They're vape batteries. It's just a lot of them. And it's like, of course it is. Like, when I found that out, I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
That is on brand.
You know, he probably wants to swap out his vape batteries with his car. Like 100, of course it is. Because if you're looking at like glorified automotive batteries, that's just not. It's not brushed aluminum and sexy enough to be a Tesla product.
Yep.
But that's what the infrastructure right now. That's like the best household option you can get. Is like, you might get 6 or 8, or you might be able to get away with just one really big one.
Yeah.
It depends on the power draw of the house. Yeah, they make some very large ones. But
not 1,000 vape batteries.
Yeah, they're not 1,000 vape batteries. They're a little bit more efficient than that. Yeah.
Can you run a vape cartridge through a Tesla?
Through
Probably.
a Tesla?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure if you plug it into the USB port or something, like just cram it in there, see what happens. You'd be vaping through your vents, like, I'm sure. And I don't want to knock people who vape.
No,
entirely.
Yeah.
It's, it's like everything else. People, especially lately in America, it's become sort of a hot button topic.
Yeah.
Because almost as a revelation, people have discovered that they're not actually genuinely healthy for you.
Yeah.
They're just less toxic than a normal cigarette.
Yeah.
That's all it is. There's also a thing where we have a couple of coincisions happening.
Okay.
Right? So we have like the marijuana legalization movement at the same time as vaping is becoming very popular. So naturally, people are trying to vape marijuana in whichever way they can, and there are some companies that do very well at synthesizing a vaporizable fluid.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of people who just sort of they like take some coconut oil and they make like an infusion, and then they stick that in a vape pen and choke to death.
Apparently, that's not a good idea.
They're shocked that that's not healthy.
Yeah. But it's coconut oil. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. So we have like, there's been a huge movement to like label vapes as like public health risks. It's like, okay, well, I mean, only insofar as technically an actual like certified vape cartridge still does, like it's got nicotine in there and some other chemicals are given off when vaporizing VGA, like vegetable oil based juices. Like, yeah, sure. They're not 100% healthy. Sure. They're just slightly less healthy. I think we run the risk a lot on the left of having the same issue when we talk about the types of technologies we can start incorporating into society, like these batteries. They're not 100% ethical.
No.
They're just more ethical than what we're already doing. And I feel like those compromises are very hard to get radicals to accept.
Yeah.
We can't. And also, like, if you look at that battery on that pole, imagine if every house just had one of those boxes on the side. You know, you could probably store a good couple of days of like backup power in that box. You know, I think that we need to start accepting that that's an option more than we do now.
Yeah.
We got to solar power this episode. I love that they start off on organic farming and then just sort of splinter and we land wherever. Soccer, solar power, whatever.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Also, but like now thinking about it, I'm surprised that most households don't have one of these, like don't have a couple of days of electricity storage just built in, because that would like, you know, first of all, most electricity cuts don't last a couple of days, so you wouldn't even like notice them. And second of all, also the like loss of life from like people who like have breathing machines and like who take oxygen and all that stuff, like that would be completely cut out.
Yeah, no.
It's actually like I'm actually now thinking about it, really surprised that that's not a thing. Like just like your house's battery.
Yeah, why wouldn't you have a battery? No, but then, you know, emergency generators wouldn't sell as well.
That is true.
Yeah, I don't know.
I keep forgetting that people want to make money. I'm such a like bright-eyed idealist. I keep forgetting that, you know, capitalism is a thing.
Yeah, but like imagine if like you went downtown and all of the buildings that had the shiny glass windows, some of those windows were solar powered.
Oh.
Or like solar panels. And then every house had a battery on it.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, now suddenly our whole city is like solar powered and can run in a rainstorm without like people losing their entire lives.
And even when there's a storm, you don't have to worry about your grandma and her like iron lung or whatever she's on.
Yeah, she's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that'll never be a thing.
Oh.
Sorry, I just felt like bringing it back to reality.
No.
We're all going to die at first.
Maybe we should become preppers.
Sorry. Yeah, let's build a bunker. Yep. I'm going to buy a ranch. Build a bunker on my ranch.
Buying a ranch is kind of the dream, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And like, because I've been looking at, so I originally was looking at houses.
Yeah.
Because my parents just moved to Maryland. So I'm going to move to probably the Virginia area. Because I don't want to be too far away from family. And most of my family's in Georgia anyway.
Okay.
So like in Michigan now, I'm fairly, like I like to have a support structure around me. And I don't really have one of those at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm going to be moving back to the South. So I was looking at houses in Virginia. And I was finding that the type of houses that I could afford to buy feasibly on the type of jobs that I could get.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I could become a cop and like get a decent
No, you cannot.
That's not going to happen.
Nope.
That's not an option. So the type of jobs that I could actually get, compared to the houses I could buy with those, aren't
Mhm.
very good. But I discovered that it's possible to buy land and build a house that I would be happy in
Yeah.
for that type of money.
Oh, it's
So I
amazing.
was looking at the prices of land.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about 10 to 15 acres in
Mm-hmm.
Virginia with a
Oh,
house
wow.
built on it. I'd like to make my house out of reclaimed shipping containers.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That sounds
at
amazing.
least in part, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it's not, I've got designs and
Yeah.
stuff that maybe one day we'll look at.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a genuinely feasible project. It would cost probably on the order of $127,000.
What?
Um,
Holy shit.
yeah, for like 15 acres and a house.
For 15 acres and a house for 100? Oh my god.
Yeah, and the house would be like 100% off grid, and all of the water for the house and for the farm that I could build on 15 acres would be done through rainwater collection.
Oh.
And all of that is very possible. I'm glad you're reacting this way, because when I was discussing like my research, like the first like foundational like groundwork pieces of it on Twitter, people were astonished that I was considering building a house out of shipping containers that would cost on the order of $100,000.
That is so cheap for a like house off grid. Holy shit! Yeah, go for that.
Yeah, and so they were thinking though, because like you can build like basically RVs, like shipping container RV, like tiny houses.
Okay.
Or on the order of like 15 to 20,000. But like with that, you don't have electricity, you don't have
and you have a tiny house. Like, do you actually want to live like for decades in a tiny house?
And like you have to park at an RV farm or at an RV lot. And like I'm also trying to think of like I need the land. I do like I'm a big guy, so an 80 square foot like shipping container is not really enough for me. It's 160 square feet. I probably shouldn't be unfair to them. 160 square feet is not enough for me.
Yeah.
That's like 4 prison cells of space. So I've done the math. I need about 500 square feet, and then another 80 square feet of like deck space, and that's like about as small as I could comfortably go.
Yeah.
Because I need to have a big kitchen because I like to cook.
Yeah.
And I need to have room to do my pepper jelly canning and production. And like I need a bedroom with a door that closes. And I'd prefer to get into my bed without the use of a ladder.
Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. And not constantly hit your head on everything.
Yeah, I would like to have a couch that I could have guests sit on.
What, you want guests in your house? Fancy lad. Come on.
Guests in my house.
Oof.
I would like to have an office where I can do work. I would like the office to not also double as my dining room. That's just me. That's more for my own needs. I found working from home a few years ago that I just ended up sitting too much and getting too big too fast. And I also was like a horrible human being. Like it's hard to keep like a grounded perspective on reality when 24 hours a day you're like doing your job. You become way too obsessed with how much money you're making or how productive or how much you can get out of working from home. I didn't enjoy it. I would go to Wendy's and have like the Bluetooth in my ear the whole time. I was that guy.
Goodness.
Yeah, so I've discovered that it's very healthy for me to have to leave my house and physically shut the door and open a different door and be in a different space. Yeah. So I need 2 pods and like all this stuff. So I build this whole plan and it's about $130,000, 120, somewhere in that range. depending on how much work I can do myself.
Yeah.
And people were looking at me like I was crazy.
What?
Like, that's so much money. I'm like, what do you
No,
mean?
it's not.
What do you mean?
No.
It's like, that's so not a lot of money at all. That's half of what a house costs.
Yeah. In Munich, that's what you barely get a studio for that. like 20 square meters, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, that's the other consideration is like I have to be close enough to a city where the cost of living in town is that high.
Yeah.
But the cost of land out of town is low enough to afford it.
Yeah.
And I've pretty much only found Virginia where that's real.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy land in California, actually, surprisingly enough. You could get like 5 or 6 acres in California and do the same thing there for about the same amount of money. The problem is the acres you get, you have to choose between barren desert wasteland in the middle of the Mojave or the hillside that is currently on fire as we speak.
Oh, cool. Cool. That's nice. Great.
Yeah. I found one great spot in Oklahoma that, like, I was almost to the point of calling my realtor to ask them to put a bid on this plot of land. It's got a cabin on it already.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. The cabin, like, there are 2 man-made ponds, and it's got like this beautiful like decked walkway down to these ponds where you can sit.
Oh,
I was
my
like,
God.
this is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's 25 acres in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And I did a little bit more like research, and like there's no water or electricity yet. It's like, okay, so it went from it was listed at like 97,000. Then we're figuring after all the costs and after installing electricity and stuff, it would be like 150.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, now what's near enough by that I could work and like afford the bills at the place?
Yeah.
And there's literally nothing.
Oh.
Nothing within like 300 miles of this place.
Oof.
And you're like, okay, so I can't go there. It's difficult. There are some spots in California that are promising. You get like 5 acres in the mountains in California and be close enough to Denver to get work.
Oh, okay.
So that's an option. But, looking into all that, I learned quite a bit about solar power pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's a very fascinating industry, and it's a lot cheaper than people like to make it seem. Especially if we can get people to downscale a little bit.
Yeah.
So like I said, the $20,000 like tiny home model, that's not completely out of the question. So for one individual, like that house is like you could do that instead of like a studio apartment.
Yeah, sure.
And live fairly comfortably. So if you were considering a studio apartment, you could consider a tiny home instead.
Yeah.
As long as you had a place to put it, which is another great thing about another reason I was looking at mini acres is because then I could offer people mini places for their mini tiny homes.
Oh, nice.
Start
a commune.
You'd have to help me grow peppers, but I feel like that's a pretty low cost for like you may live here.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a communist like commune, but it's like it's a cooperative. That's pretty close.
Nice.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
A little bit hard to make happen, but I'm working on it.
Exactly.
Say I'm about 5 years away from starting to put something like that in motion. If everything should go to plan.
Yeah. That is so exciting. Holy shit.
Yeah. If everything goes to plan. Obviously, there are some considerations that I have to make, like getting the land and getting all of those loans is going to take some initial investment.
Yeah.
So, like, I have a house I have to finish selling before I can do that, and I have to get some sort of stable income that I can rely on to qualify for a mortgage to build the thing. But once I have those 2 checked off, which I should be able to get done within the next 5 years, then I'm going to buy a ranch.
Wow. Holy
And I'm
shit.
gonna build a house on it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna build at least one tiny home to allow people to come and just like stay on the ranch in the tiny home.
Me, please.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's like a list of people.
Yeah.
But I always feel bad because a while back I was
Mm-hmm.
homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see people on Twitter all the time who are like, "Oh, I'm losing my place and I need a place to stay."
Yeah.
I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if I could be like, "Yeah, well, I just happen to have like a cabin-sized place
Mm-hmm.
that you can stay until you get on your feet."
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get to that point. It's a little difficult.
Mm.
Couple of challenges. It would be a lot easier if I could just like hire a wife. Like if I could just install a wife, like get a wife contract.
Mm-hmm.
Makes this whole process much easier.
Do like a Tim Pool video and like just advertise.
Yeah, just advertise, just like GoFundMe wife. That's a quirk of American
Mm.
economics. If you want to do anything, you need one of two things. Either you need a business tax ID
Mm-hmm.
or you need a wife.
Yep.
And like one of those two things, and suddenly your purchasing power goes up by like 70%.
Jesus.
It's nuts.
I once looked into like buying land, and the only thing I could afford was like in the mountains in Hungary. But it was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend on Twitter who
Mm-hmm.
suggested in the mountains in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and equally it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was just like I was looking at the area and I'm like, okay, well this is incredibly high needs.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be very difficult to get any work done there. Not very difficult. It's possible.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult to get any
Mm-hmm.
work done there. And the percolation tests for the land are not great,
Mm-hmm.
which means it becomes even more difficult to get loans to build there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the distance from places where I could work are so high that like there are just options that are a little bit more practical for my needs.
Mm-hmm.
The mountains, man, I wish.
Yeah. God,
I
yeah.
wish. If I like win the lottery, maybe I do the whole thing on the mountainside instead
Mm-hmm.
of looking for. Right now, I'm looking for like scrap pieces of farmland almost.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get farms, and a farm in America should be about 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with like off parcels
Uh-huh.
of land that are like 15 acres in between two farms with like some trees because nobody's felt like knocking the trees down because it's not a part of their farm. It's like that's the type of land that I'm looking at,
Mm-hmm.
just scrap land. But it feels weird being in America because we have scrap land. Like there's just
Yeah.
there's just like
That's a
wide
weird
open, beautiful
concept.
There's just wide open, beautiful space of just like, yeah,
Bits
nobody
of
wants
land
this.
nobody's claimed yet. What?
Well, no, people have claimed it.
Yeah, but using it. Sorry.
Yeah, but nobody's doing anything with
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah. Especially Texas. I should show you land and farm. I should show you some of the plots in Texas that are like hundreds of acres. So in Texas, I still have my price filter applied. Let's just open that up. Let's just open that up. Because there's this one guy in Texas who I like. I'm looking at plots of land in Texas that are like in the 20 acre range, 15 to 20 acre range.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find his listings because when I tell you this man must own 1,000,000 acres of land, like I think he genuinely owns like all of the land of Texas. It's ridiculous. So me send a link to this guy. This isn't the guy, but this is one of the guys. Paste, send. And if you click that link and you just scroll down a little bit,
I just embiggened you. Sorry. Where did it go? Didn't it just open up? No. Oh, God.
that's me again.
Okay. So, where's the chat go now? Oh my God, I'm useless. It's not the...
What?
Okay, I'm just gonna manually make...
There it is.
that.
There it is.
Ha 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 ha. Okay. Copy
Yes,
link.
that's it.
Paste link.
No.
Open.
So much quicker.
Oh,
so,
okay.
If you scroll down this gentleman's page a little bit, you'll start to see the properties that he has for sale. So you can get
400 acres.
If you have 400 acres for about $1.5 million. But that's not the best deal that he has. He's got 2,560 acres. If you scroll down a little bit further, for about $7 million.
What the? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. If you scroll all the way down, though.
Like, here you can get 410 acres for less than the average price of a house here. Like a single family house. And I'm sorry. I'm just like, my brain is kind of melting. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's 400 acres of land.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But as we get toward the bottom of his listing, right?
Yeah.
He's got 24 pages of listings.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So like.
What? But there isn't that much land, like globally.
He's selling it, so it's gotta be there. Not only is there that much land, it's for sale from this one guy. And he's not the only one, right? So like, looking at places in Texas that are like, up to 25 acres, right? Because when I was starting out, I was just sort of throwing out like numbers, like 25 acres. Let's see what's available for that.
Yeah.
And there are several of these same like land tycoon type guys who own just pages and pages of plots of like beautiful 200-acre like like just expanses, and they're all for sale.
Wow.
For like, if I put my max at like, what was it, 100? Trying to remember the settings I used for this search because I stopped doing it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Because I was getting depressed.
Yep.
But basically I'd spent days on this website at work just searching for land in different parts of the country. And obviously the prices that you see on the website aren't what you would actually pay, right? Like you would have to go to the guy and like negotiate with him and like, how much is it really going to cost? But yeah, he's got another plot there that's 1,800 acres for $10 million, and it's like,
oh my God.
One, who has $10 million?
Yeah.
But two,
who needs that many acres?
1,800 acres? Like what? 1,800 acres? Like,
that is crazy.
Yeah. square mile. If I were to say 1,800 acres, that's like almost 3 square miles of land.
Wow.
Square kilometers. 7.3 square kilometers of land.
Holy. Oh my God, there's a video about the land there. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, like, if I win the lottery, I'm buying
Oh yeah.
these.
Oh yeah.
I am. And, look, call me a dirty capitalist if you want. I'm going to buy one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to build many houses and let people live in the houses for
Exactly. But that's like literally my plan right now, win the lottery.
free. Yeah. So what a lot of this land that
Mm-hmm.
you see, where you see like these like perfect rows of trees,
Yeah.
you're looking at forestry land.
Mm-hmm.
So those are like manually planted rows of trees
Mm-hmm.
that they're growing deliberately to cut down later.
Yeah.
They grow them, they wait for the tree to die, and then they cut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And the logging industry, like most of that is either being exported now or,
Mm-hmm.
It still happens,
Yeah.
but that's what a lot of this land is. It's people getting out of the logging industry.
Okay.
So you end up with huge patches of like logging land. The problem is the land is worthless with the trees planted the way that they're planted.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just like one of those pure capitalism like moves where the most efficient way to plant the trees is to plant the same tree in these neat little rows over and over and over again. But that's terrible for the actual land.
Yeah.
So, it's bad for wildlife. The trees are planted too close to be like sustainable in that way, so they rarely grow to like full maturity.
Yeah.
Um,
You'd actually have to do a lot of work to get an actual forest to grow there.
Yeah. So that's exactly the point. That's why the land is available, and in a lot of places it's so cheap.
Yeah.
Is because you have to reclaim that from all those trees, and companies, they just leave the project and just sell the land.
Yeah.
To people like this, who then have to wholesale the land back out to idiots who clean up the property. So
I would quite like
that's
to
where a
be
lot
one
of
of
this
these
stuff comes.
idiots.
I wish.
Yeah.
If I had the money, I would definitely be your stooge, and I would buy your 1,800 acres. And I would spend the next 50 years of my life cleaning it.
Yeah.
And like building an actual forest there.
Just going row by row, undoing your damage. Well.
Yeah. And it's so difficult because like also you don't want to cut down living trees.
Yeah.
Not just because it's terrible for the environment, but also the wood is useless. Wet wood, you like can't build out of it until it's dried out and dead anyway. So you have to wait until these trees die.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a bunch of like small dead trees that aren't particularly good for construction because they're thin and aren't.
And you're probably gonna get pests. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's difficult to work with. Like 1,800 acres of like crap forestry is bad.
Yeah.
Like that's bad land.
Yeah.
But it's also that's 3 square miles of land. So I'm sure I could figure something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Factory foresting.
Wow.
Everything that we do to mass produce anything that's like that occurs in nature just ruins it.
Yeah.
Like, you want to make flowers? Well, now there's no water in the. There's no water in your wells, and all of your people are dehydrated and dying. Like, okay, you want to make trees? Well, now look, there's no biodiversity, so.
It's like if we actually like planned and went out of our way to ruin the environment, we could not do it like more efficiently.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we could not have ruined this better. I mean, unless we did like the full Brazil and just lit it all on fire.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he has 473 listings of like plots of land for sale. and I would like to buy some.
Oh yeah.
I would like to be given some. If there are any wealthy landowners who would like to sponsor my pepper growing ranch, contact me. Gmail.
Mr. Andy Flack, if you ever feel overwhelmed by any of your plots, we would take them off your hand.
Listen, I'm on principle, I'm against the idea of sponsorships. However,
if Elon Musk would like us to say a few nice words about him, we're available for the low, low price of $10,773,015.
listen, how about, I'll reach out to Mr. Flack, you reach out to Elon, and we'll see if we can get him to sponsor the land and Elon to sponsor the solar power.
Yeah.
And then we'll say nothing bad about capitalism for the rest of our lives.
I think that's a plan.
Yeah. So now we have covered solar power, the price of land in Texas, organic farming,
the forestry agriculture.
Yeah.
No, I think it's been a productive 2 hours.
Yeah.
All right.
It has been a pleasure, as always.
It's been amazing talking to you. And we'll talk again on your Tuesday, my Wednesday.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect.
Excellent. Have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, stop streaming.